On today's show, the unbeaten run in Vegas has come to a close, and it happened with a blowout third quarter. The Bucks, really, not too many positives from this game against the Brooklyn Nets. We'll see if we can find any, but some of the big name players, certainly from the Bucks main roster standpoint, that we were looking to see, didn't exactly have their best performances today. We saw the first look at AJ Green and Lindell Wigginton, and there was some interesting roster news with Wigginton. So we'll get to that as well. If we've got time at the back end, I might ask Frank about flop warnings in the NBA, extra coaches challenges, and some other news that came out today. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Bucks. My name is Kane Pittman. You can see and hear me on this show Monday to Friday, and also find my work over at ESPN alongside me, the founder of brewhoop.com and longtime voice of the podcast, Frank Madden, who's put a Brewers hat on because he doesn't even want to wear any Bucks gear after this loss to the Brooklyn Nets in Summer League. We're going to break it down. It was a 92-71 final there, but as always, we thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first watch or first listen of every weekday, right through Summer League, right through the offseason, World Cup coming up next month, and then before we know it, the NBA season will be back. So we appreciate the support. Drop a comment, a like, subscribe, a rating, a review, all the things that you can do to help the show because it's free to do. But we appreciate you guys and girls watching and listening to the show and having your input about what you're seeing with the Milwaukee Bucks. So I don't know about you, Frank, but I had me feet up at halftime. I was chuckling to myself thinking, score's tied. This is going to be easy for the third quarter Summer League Bucks. They've been dominant in that quarter so far in this tournament. They were outscored 35-9 in the third. That was clearly where this game got away from the Bucks. They had 25 turnovers in this game. They only had one player score in double digits. And overall, this was not a performance to remember, and it felt very Bucks Summer League-y from what we've seen in years gone by. And it was interesting tonight because we actually did see the starting lineup that I was excited to see when they went small. All the guys that you think could have an impact: Livingston, Beauchamp, Jackson Jr., Green, Wigginton. My optimism was short-lived tonight, Frank.
Yeah, if you thought I was just walking off the set in protest there, Kane, for those watching on video, I just had to plug in my computer. My computer's running a little low on juice. I'm also wearing the shirt my wife gave me, this Rockets
really
shirt in protest. Tonight all I can do is celebrate Jabari Smith having an awesome summer league because I'm not getting much from the Bucks today. But yeah, I mean, at least it's only summer league, I guess. Are you a fan of the movie Shawshank Redemption, Kane?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So you know the scene where Andy Dufresne has to see the thing is so did you not know the result of the game when you were watching it?
Well, there was a little white lie there. Unfortunately, and if you can allow me to complain about something that happened on League Pass today. So I text you and said, I'm on a little bit of a delay, so we're going to have to podcast a bit later. You said I'm the same. Beautiful. So I sit down on League Pass. You've got high scores, which is great because then you can't see any of the scores. You can go in and watch the game. But the problem is underneath Bucks Nets, it's got their record for the tournament, and it had updated to the Bucks being 2-1. So I'm like, what is happening? What's the point of hiding the scores if you're just going to tell me the record anyway? So terrible. So I knew.
I was following on my phone, but I knew because I don't have ESPNU, which was the channel that the game was being shown on here in the States. But they let you rewatch later on Watch ESPN. So I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna just have to wait to watch the replay. So I was following along though, and so I got to experience the disaster class third quarter on my phone as I was quote unquote watching it there. So I knew it was what was in store for me. I knew we were going to be doing this podcast, and so I knew that I was going to have to force myself to watch this game. And so that's where the Shawshank Redemption piece comes in. I felt like Andy Dufresne, knowing that he's got to crawl through like 2 miles of shit to get to the other side, to get to that freedom. And I don't know if it was I guess the third quarter was the 2 miles of shit. Because yeah, that was kind of like the worst possible sort of summer league, chaos. Other team is fired up, playing with energy, and the Bucks were just kind of the opposite of what we saw in some of the previous third quarters, where they just were completely disorganized. And MarJon Beauchamp, like as indifferent of a Vegas game as you're going to find, doesn't score a single freaking point. It's just like, oh my god. So yeah, I mean, yes, this is, I guess, where we say, hey, summer league doesn't matter, right? So we don't really have to feel bad about it. But yeah, it's too bad. These we don't have a whole lot of basketball here, Kane, in July to enjoy. So for the Bucks to leave a turd floating in the pool at the hotel was unfortunate. But hey, Omari Moore. Hey, Omari Moore made a basket. One of the Bucks two-way players actually has made a basket in summer league. And he actually got to play a little bit, which was nice. And you mentioned some changes we saw. Maybe they heard me complaining about Nico Mannion and Taco Fall playing too much because those guys both started on the bench in this game. Wigginton was in, and the Bucks played small to start, which I'm all for, because who cares about playing a traditional lineup or whatever. Just get weird with it. But obviously, yeah, just not a whole lot to write home about with this game. And I don't know, what do we have 2 games? We have 1 game plus playoffs left? Is that kind of where we're at? Because certainly this game we probably don't feel a whole lot of need to belabor, but yeah, just not a lot went right, especially after halftime. It's kind of hard to play a vaguely game of organized basketball and get outscored 35-9 in the third quarter, but that happened. So yeah, burn the videotape, Kane, and we live to fight another day.
No, that's exactly right. I thought, we're really scraping the bottom of the barrel here to come up with some fun things that happen, but I thought, the one thing that I think is going to be pretty safe with Andre Jackson is that he will play with a level of energy that it didn't look like the rest of the teammates had tonight. We've spoken about the fluctuations a little bit with MarJon Beauchamp, but tonight he looked pretty flat. Ultimately, this team looked like a group of guys that have been in Vegas for 4 or 5 days, because I know I'm absolutely not at my best if I have to spend that much time in Vegas. So maybe they're just wearing a little thin towards the back end of Summer League. But Jackson Jr. had a nice lob finish from MarJon Beauchamp there. He attempted a massive block and sent, I think it was David Duke Jr. flying into the floor there, which was a foul. But yeah, there just weren't too many positives to come from this. AJ Green knocked down a corner 3, but he wasn't heavily involved. He was going with the headband tonight, though, which is interesting to see. So Miami in a couple of days, and we'll see if they can bounce back. I think there were some people that thought that maybe
revenge. This is a revenge game, right?
Well, that's exactly right. There were some people that thought that perhaps me and you could have been a little bit higher on the performances of some of the young guys over the last 2 days. They thought maybe the collective wet blanket. But tonight, I'm not going to get too upset either. This is Summer League. This is what we come to expect. You want to see flashes from guys that you think can ultimately play a different role for the Bucks than what you've seen in Vegas. So yeah, I'm happy to wash this one away. I want to ask you about Lindell Wigginton next, though, because you did mention him. Jon Horst did a sit down with our friend Eric Name. If there were any other takeaways from that, feel free to get into that. And then there are some rules that they were at least floating about getting into at the Las Vegas Summer League. And now today, it looks like it's coming into the regular season. So still a fair bit to talk about tonight. And we'll push this game to the side because we don't need to talk about it anymore. But first, what we do need to talk about is bird dogs, because if you are in Vegas, I can guarantee you one thing that you're doing, and that's wearing shorts, because from what I can see, it is absolutely stinking hot, and bird dogs make you look good as well. And if you're in Vegas, you want to be looking good. Bird dogs stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. Bird dog shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but they just fit better. They're more comfortable. And they fit better than regular shorts because your normal style shorts are made of a stiff, restricting cotton. That's not the case with bird dogs. They fixed this issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki, but stretches so you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice the movement. So I'm a big shorts guy, Frank, and you can wear them wherever you want to go. I've never done this before. People would have done it. I'm doing axe throwing in a couple of hours, which I don't know. I don't know. I think it's a thing. I actually first heard about it in the US, but anyway, I'm doing that tonight. And so I want to be comfortable. I want to make sure I've got full movement, and the Bird Dog shorts are going to help me out. So go to birddogs.com/lockedonnba or enter the promo code LockedOnNBA for a free Yeti style tumbler. That's birddogs.com/lockedonnba, or use the promo code LockedOnNBA for a free Yeti style tumbler. You won't want to take your bird dogs off. We can promise you that. Eric Name sat down with Bucks GM Jon Horst. He does this every year around this time to run through all the signings that the Bucks have made. It was interesting that the topic of a backup point guard came up, and not that I expected Jon Horst to come out and be like, "Oh yeah, we're about to make a big time trade. Just hang in there, brothers." No. So I didn't think he was going to say that, but he did mention that we're pretty happy with the roster. We've got Lindell Wigginton as a two-way. I hadn't read anything about that, but I think at this point in time, we've seen Lindell Wigginton play good basketball at the G League level. The numbers are great. He's played some minutes with the NBA team. He's clearly familiar with the franchise, the roster, the front office, all those types of things. But it was at least a little note. I mean, we keep asking about the backup point guard. Justin Garcia last week on the podcast did note, hey, maybe Wigginton is going to be that guy that's going to play regular season minutes. We know last year AJ Green played 35 games for the Bucks, which is a lot for a contending team on a two-way contract, but at least a little nugget there. We saw him for the first time tonight, as you referenced, but Wigginton, maybe just a Bucks two-way lifer.
Yeah, I mean, like if you look at Spot Track or some of the different sites that sort of track contracts, they've had Wigginton as still being on a two-way coming into the season. So with Omari Moore being added, basically Omari Moore they announced as a two-way, the Bucks did, and Wigginton, I haven't seen any official announcement about him being on a Bucks two-way, but obviously it was alluded to by Jon Horst, and it's been in sort of the data. So we'll see. I mean, again, like those are pretty easy to roll. I mean, there's not a whole lot of there's not like cap consequences if you waive a two-way guy. But the cost of two-ways has gone up significantly. I mean, it's now half of a rookie salary at this point. So I mean, it's I think up over $500,000 in terms of the total cost of a two-way. Now you have 3 of those roster spots available, which hey, more dudes to watch in summer league who actually have a chance of sticking with the big club. And obviously there was some thought on draft night of Jay-Z Gortman potentially getting another one of those two-ways, but does not appear that that's happened so far. But I think he's been an interesting guy to watch. Coming from overtime elite, sure, give him the third one. I'm fine with that, especially given the lack of point guard depth on the roster. Otherwise, keep in mind those guys are limited to 50 total games and are not playoff eligible. So if in some dream scenario one of those guys actually pops and is worth keeping on, you'd have to figure out how to open up a roster spot to convert to a two-way or to a regular NBA contract. But again, let's just say my concern level that one of those two-way guys is going to be so good that you're going to need to convert him to a regular contract. That would be a wonderful problem to have, but I'm not exactly going to lose sleep over that given how these things tend to go, and the odds of that are probably not all that high. But yeah, the whole discussion that Eric had with Jon Horst, I mean, certainly the backup point guard discussion was not, let's just say, if you were concerned about it, I don't think you came out of that discussion feeling like like your fears were allayed when they're talking about these two-way guys who've never really proven anything at the NBA level. And Omari Moore got a shout out as a kind of a secret weapon. A little bit too secret right now. Would like for Omari Moore to become a little less secret. There's definitely some hashtag secret Dante vibes with Omari Moore right now. But at least he got his first points of summer league tonight. And we'll see. This was always going to be the downside of having so many potential roster guys, so many potential two-way exhibit 10 type guys on this summer league roster, is that it's just been hard to make minutes, honestly, for some of these guys like Gortman and Moore, just haven't really played much. And would, again, not that it necessarily would have helped the Bucks win games, with them kind of doing some on the job training as, rookies, right? True rookies, unless you're talking about like first round picks, it's hard for these true rookies to actually sort of help you even in summer league. Usually it's, the guys that have had a trip around the block, have some experience with this, that tend to be more useful. Although Nico Mannion, multi-year veteran of European play as an established player, I mean, he's just continued to be awful shooting the ball throughout the summer league, and so it's just been kind of a sad trombone from from the Bucks as far as some of these guys. But yeah, I don't know. I thought the Horst discussion was definitely interesting, alluding to being, kind of, I think he said at peace with where they are with the roster. Sort of interesting. Sort of makes it sound like they tried to do more stuff and kind of had to resign themselves to maybe they wouldn't be able to pull something off. But again, what is he going to say? Like, well, I'm sure, is he gonna say like, oh, we've got some irons in the fire as far as potential trades, and I'm sure we'll pull off something, in the next, of course he's gonna say, if you're a good general manager, you lie to some extent, or you withhold selectively some of the things that you're trying to do. So I don't know. I'm not we're kind of now in the NBA calendar where most things have sort of been flushed through. I think the Lillard situation not being resolved, James Harden still being, disgruntled but not yet traded. I do think there is an opportunity potentially where, if and when those guys' situations get resolved, that there could be some secondary moves that may have a little bit more clarity, and maybe there are potential things the Bucks could do that, again, not that they're trading for Damian Lillard or James Harden, or even directly with like the Heat, right? I'm not saying they're trying to get Tyler Hero or something like that, but you never know. I mean, like, there's potentially all these trades could be like 3-4 team type of deals, and if teams are, again, potentially trying to maintain some flexibility to be part of those deals, then who knows? Maybe they are, maybe they will become a bit more open for business after that. But we'll see. I think now as we get towards mid-July, most moves have been made, most signings have been done. We're obviously at this point just kind of waiting for them to, I don't know, do a press release in mid-August to say that the Thanasis has signed a 1-year contract or something like that. But yeah, maybe the Bucks are just going to go into training camp without a backup point guard on an NBA contract. And I mean, there's lots of weird things they can do, whether it's, I mean, Andre Jackson as the de facto backup point guard. I don't think that's going to work very well, but who knows, right? I mean, new coaching staff. We don't have any, we haven't seen Adrian Griffin do this as a head coach previously. We know Toronto had some very unconventional lineups. They didn't play many backup point guard minutes the last couple of years. They just kind of ran Fred VanVleet into the ground. So who knows how much that reflects Adrian Griffin's view on the need for a true kind of backup point guard, or whether it was just sort of the reality of what Toronto was dealing with, or what Nick Nurse wanted to do. Again, we're just kind of guessing, but anyway, we'll see. And I think certainly, relative to where the Bucks were in the second half of the season, where you had Chris Middleton healthy, you had Joe Ingles healthy, and you had obviously Javon Carter, who, yes, Javon is kind of more like a shooting guard in many ways. I mean, he could still bring the ball up, to start the offense, at least vaguely, competently. So, yeah, you obviously don't have Joe, you don't have Javon anymore. So does that mean an opportunity for Lindell Wigginton? I don't know. I'm just really curious, to see kind of how Adrian Griffin, thinks of these rotations and who's going to get opportunities. Does he play tons of guys early in the season? Does, he have like a 10-man group that he ends up settling on pretty quickly? Who knows, right? I imagine with especially a new head coach, new group of, new to this group of players, I would expect he'll probably cast a wider net than, an established coach, Bud or otherwise, might, just because he hasn't seen these guys, he hasn't worked with these guys, so he may be more willing to kind of give different guys opportunities early in the season. But again, as we know, so much of that is often driven by injuries and availability and things like that. So at this point, we're a few months off from seeing any of that, but certainly preseason will be, the next first opportunity, especially when you think about the real roster, including not just some of the guys we're seeing here in the summer.
I did read an article a little while back about AJ Green saying that it was really challenging for him to come into the NBA because he'd always been a point guard, he'd always been handling the ball. Anyway, I'm just throwing that out there. Maybe that's the secret weapon. I know Jon Horst was talking about Omari Moore, but he didn't mention AJ Green as the backup point guard. Anyway, we didn't see a lot of dribbling from AJ Green tonight, but as I mentioned, he did knock down a corner three. He's on the main roster. We'll see if he gets many opportunities. He certainly did, perhaps more than I expected last season as well. But they've got a lot of young guys on the main roster, as you pointed to, so it's going to be interesting. Sometimes we see rule challenges in the offseason, and they look good on paper, but then they don't ultimately impact the game in any way. I mentioned the flop warnings or the flop penalty last week on the show. They were bringing that in for Las Vegas Summer League. And the coaches challenge as well. An extra coaches challenge. I don't know. We'll get to that next. Today's sponsor of the podcast is BetterHelp. And we all understand that sometimes in life we're faced with tough choices and the path forward isn't always clear. Whether you're dealing with decisions around your career, relationships, or anything else, therapy can help you stay connected to what you really want while you navigate life so you can move forward with confidence and excitement as well. You got to trust yourself, Frank, and you got to trust yourself to make decisions that align with your values. And sometimes it's challenging, particularly with work. Maybe you've got a big move coming up. You're not sure whether to change career, change jobs. I've certainly gone through that in the past, and I can tell you it is highly, highly, highly stressful. I'm not a best sleeper, a great sleeper at the best of times. But therapy can help. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, which I love because I don't want to be running into people like, not that there's anything wrong with it, but you just would prefer not to have that conversation. Maybe you want to keep these things to yourself. So it's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedonNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonNBA. Go check out BetterHelp. Frank, I haven't discussed this with you. The flop warning coming in, a free throw for floppers out there. And actually, I did ask the question about the Boston Celtics last week, whether they're any more likable without Marcus Smart and Grant Williams. So, geez, it would have been lucrative business for the Milwaukee Bucks playing the Boston Celtics if they were called for some of those flops. But we'll see how it's actually adjudicated during the game. The other one that was announced today, which I know some fans have asked for, was an extra coaches challenge. So, this new rule will award a team a second coaches challenge if the first challenge is successful. The team will not retain the timeout used to initiate its second challenge, regardless of whether it's successful. That's interesting. The timeout-related rules governing a team's use of first challenge will be unchanged. So essentially, you can use a second challenge, but you don't get to keep the timeout if you are successful. And of course, you've got to be successful in the first challenge. I don't know, Frank. I mean, I don't like the game delays. The coach's challenge takes too long as it is. I totally understand why there are fans out there that have called for this and they think that it makes sense and they're annoyed about the officials. And I get it. And maybe if you're the Bucks, we've seen it time and time again with the block charge stuff that I still can't wrap my head around why Giannis never gets the benefit of the doubt. Maybe this will be something that Adrian Griffin can use to benefit this Milwaukee Bucks team. Maybe keep Giannis out of foul trouble. Just the idea of NBA games going longer and more delays and sitting and waiting for the official because his mic doesn't work and he doesn't know what they're looking at, that doesn't excite me.
I think it's a no-brainer. I mean, if you have a successful challenge, I never understood. It always seemed weird to me that then suddenly the refs got off the hook and they could, you couldn't basically get them a second time. So I'm totally fine with it. I get people don't like the stoppages. My view is like, I don't like that the game officials review the challenges because to me, it's just like, well, they're always going to be less likely to overturn their own call anyway. So I've always would have felt like I'd prefer, there to be like the video room in Secaucus and just have them basically adjudicate the challenges because I think also like they can, you kind of know like when a challenge is going to come typically, right? Then they can more quickly review it and get you an answer versus like the officials have to walk over, put on the headsets, get the monitors turned around, like go through the whole song and dance, and they have to confer with each other and blah blah blah, right? Like, I think you could really speed up the reviews if you had it done centrally. You'd also get rid of some of just the bias of the game
Maybe.
officials doing it. So that would be my answer. Would just be like, well, let's make the reviews just go quickly because they take so long.
Yes.
And I feel like you could do them more quickly, especially if they were centrally reviewed. So I'm good with kind of if you get it right the first time, or if you're correct with your first challenge and you get to keep another one. I think the interesting thing too is that a lot of times coaches will keep their challenges until late in the game, just in the sense that like hey, if there's a really high leverage play, I don't want to have to use my challenge in the second quarter or something like that. So I don't know what the stats are. I'm curious how often games went by without any challenge being used. I think that's probably going to go down too. So yes, that's bad news for you and anyone else that hates stoppages. The other thing I would say too is like if you're trying to figure out like, oh, how are we going to make up the time from for an additional potential stoppage. I've said this before. For the life of me, I have no idea why the clear path fouls like always get reviewed and they always take so long to review them. Like, to me, a clear path, just call it on the floor. Like, who cares? Like, especially it's like if you want to say in the fourth quarter a clear path foul gets reviewed, but like
Well,
officially
they
or
don't
something
need
like
to
that, like
review it
fine.
anymore. They've got the unsportsmanlike or the transition foul. I don't even know why clear path is a rule anymore. It's the same thing, and you can call it on the floor as you pointed to.
Well, but it's more punitive though too, but though, right?
Yeah,
It's
but
two shots in the
what?
ball. But I agree. We're saying the same thing. Like, just
Yeah,
don't bother like reviewing these. Like, who cares? And to me, it's like just a low value added thing anyway. But I will say this though, on the flopping stuff, I've been surprised how little discussion there has been of like what they're actually defining a flop as. And people may recall, I mean, the what is it, like a decade old? Like they introduced flopping as sort of like an after the fact fine worthy thing like 10 years ago or something like that. And you saw it a little bit and then just as it completely disappeared the last few years more or less. And so I assume the same criteria is going to be used for these technical in-game technical calls as they were for these sort of after the fact review things, which is basically like if you like basically fake or try to deceive the official into making a call by like, again, faking that you got hit in the face or totally dramatically overplaying something, then they can call that as a technical. That is what I was assuming. Like, I feel like some people are like, because flopping means different things to different people. I think some people like think like if a guy's like sliding over into Giannis's path and it's like a block charge and he gets knocked over, that like that's a flop. And it's like I sometimes also refer to those as flops. Like when guys aren't like trying to play defense, they're just like basically like trying to take charges. But like I don't think Giannis is going to have like a bunch of like I don't think there's going to be a bunch of flopping technicals called on guys trying to defend Giannis, because honestly, like Giannis makes tons of contact. To me, the thing that I wanted to see was the expansion of the block charge circle. Basically the Kevin Love rule, which I know got some discussion early in the playoffs when Giannis and I forget somebody else got hurt. Right? Was it Ja? I think it might have been Ja Morant. Got hurt basically going up for shots and guys sliding underneath like Kevin Love. Illegally basically they're blocking fouls and they're dangerous. That would have been the thing I would have much rather seen implemented, because I think again it forces help defenders to actually like try to actually play defense more. I think there's also potential, I don't know if we'll ever see it, but basically saying that like these help defenders who aren't defending the ball, that they can't do that at all. That's like the whole like hashtag ban the charge concept. It's not that if you're defending on ball that like the offensive player can do whatever they want to you, but it's just the idea of like Marcus Smart flying in as a help defender can't just plant himself under the basket and try to draw a charge that way. So the flopping thing, I mean, it doesn't hurt, I guess. there's been versions of this in pretty much every other league, I think. Like, I think college has a version of this. Kane, I assume NBL, there's some version of this in the NBL, right? I mean, what's been your experience of as far as how this is implemented there? Because I just don't know how much refs are going to call it. I feel like there's going to be things where it's like there's going to be they're going to call it some in like October, November, and then is it just going to kind of dissipate, be forgotten by the springtime? Like that feels like a lot of times how these rule changes get implemented. They kind of wax and wane a bit, and by the end of the season they've waned to like basically not getting called. But I don't know what your perspective is, having actually seen something like this implemented in basketball that you watch every day.
Yeah, it's good if they call it. To your point, they call it in the NBL. It doesn't really slow down the game, because if there's a flop, they'll indicate that there's a flop, and then the play will continue until the next dead ball, and then there's a free throw. So it doesn't actually really slow down the game that much, but it's highlighted. And to your point about the block charge, they will still call block charge flops in the NBL. In fact, that might be the most common flop that they'll call in the NBL. There's a flop warning, and then the second time there'll be a free throw. But it is the really obvious, if you're just standing there and someone just kind of touches you and you go flying backwards, which I think this is the way it works. And I mentioned this in the podcast last week, but sometimes you will see players flop if they maybe get hit in the eye or hit in the face. And I don't know how you adjudicate that, because it is clearly a flop. But if they don't do that, then they're not going to get the offensive foul call. To me, if there's incidental contact like that, maybe you just let it go. I've got no problem if players are flying around all over the place if they get a flop warning. So I think the big question for the NBA will just be whether they actually call them, because I'm with you. I'm a little bit skeptical at the moment. And the other one is for the challenges in the NBL. They do have a separate room, a replay center that makes the calls. I wouldn't say it speeds up the process, but maybe we got some more faith in our friends in New York. Maybe they can. maybe they can.
Yeah, and I do like the idea too. It's like, I think the one area where you will see like where this could help. Let's use Giannis, right? Giannis is the obvious guy on the Bucks. Examples where like a small guy in the post, Giannis like brushes up against him. Exactly. The guy just like launches himself to the ground. Like that is where I think you'll see Giannis benefit from this type of call. And I do like the fact that, currently, like when guys do that, the best sort of call for Giannis is typically a no call, right? Like just like let the guy fall down and then he just looks over and just dunks or whatever. We've seen that, on a number of occasions, every year. So the idea that you can basically have a guy do that, you can get a dunk, and then, they can call a technical at the next stoppage and you get another point out of it. Like, hey, no downside to that. And again, they may not even really need to enforce it much to potentially get the change in behavior. Because the goal is not that, every game's going to have like 3 of these calls. The goal is basically to create a disincentive so that people don't even try it. And then ideally, no, the refs won't have to call it, right? So we'll see. I mean, I appreciate that they're trying to do it. I think, people often talk about sort of like, oh, there's like a big flopping problem in the NBA. I think there is a problem, but I don't know. Again, I feel like people's definitions of flops kind of varies. And I don't know that this is going to solve, everything that people consider flopping. But hey, if you get a little bit of it, it's upside, right? And hopefully it disincentivizes, the Marcus Smarts and Grant Williams of the world from doing what they've been doing. And but I think we talked about it before. I think, you talked about it a week ago, but I'll reiterate: the Boston Celtics deciding that they're no longer going to be, a switch heavy team that can throw a bunch of different guys at Giannis and, have 2 kind of premier floppers in Grant Williams and Marcus Smart on the floor during high leverage minutes. Like, I'm all for it. Hey, Al Horford has had, some good moments defending Giannis, but if basically their defense against Giannis is Al Horford and a bunch of guys like, Kristaps, who, I mean, Giannis has just eaten Kristaps for lunch. I think he's averaged like 38 points a game against Kristaps teams in the last 5 years or so. So yeah, Boston Celtics, I get why they felt like they had to do something, but man, they just became like a lot less flexible defensively. And I don't know. It's been interesting, like listening to Bill Simmons and, some of the other Celtics people that I follow. It's like they're all trying to talk themselves into like, well, Kristaps was good in Washington last year when nobody gave a shit and they weren't good, right? I don't know. Kristaps, like, you think Kristaps and Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are going to be like this like simpatico group of guys that just feed off each other emotionally? Kristaps and his fucking dead eyes, and never really won anything or been a part of really any winning teams. Like, I don't know. I'm just I'm curious. He's a good player, but that I don't know. I'm sure he'll be especially a good regular season player probably, but it also seems like the kind of guy that like Celtics fans might hate, a month into the season, and it seems like a lot of them are kind of in denial about that. So we'll see. But anyway, we had to, Bucks get their asses handed in the summer league game. We managed to bend this back to basically wishing bad things upon the Boston Celtics. So I feel like this ended up being very on brand for us, Kane.
No doubt. And Spicy Frank tonight.
I think the last time I wore this Rockets shirt was when the Rockets beat the Celtics in Houston earlier this year, and I was so pleased. Jason Tatum missed like a potential game-winning layup. Just a really fun night for me to root for the Houston Rockets. So yeah, go Bucks, go Rockets. Yay.
Still a little bit of summer league action to come. Thursday night, I believe, is when they're playing the Miami Heat. So we'll have a post-game pod after that. We need to discuss the in-season tournament as well. I know the Bucks maybe tonight didn't have a great night in Vegas, but maybe there is happier times ahead in December with the NBA Cup. So we're going to discuss that as well. So there's always going to be news around the NBA. Let us know in the YouTube comments if there's something in particular that you want us to talk about, and we'll hit it as the off season, I should say, continues to roll on. So we'll leave it there for Frank and myself. We'll catch you all tomorrow.